Peace and greetings. Welcome to the Dakota County Library Virtual Programming Series. I'm your host, Dr. Marcellus Davis, and today we will be looking at the worldwide phenomenon known as hip hop. In particular, we'll be talking about the role that youth have played in shaping this particular phenomenon. Prior to our ascension into this learning experience, I want to thank, on behalf of my family, my mother, my family, my wife, um, thank hip hop for its role in helping develop this young black man into becoming a man. Hip hop's role in scholarship and teaching me about other black people's experience around the U.S. and the world. I want to thank hip hop for influencing my commitment to reading and enhancing my skill set. I want to thank hip hop for its ability to help me enhance my oratorical skills. And I want to thank hip hop for continually to challenge me in different ways as I think about how the world has operated and shaped, as we talk about power, as we talk about white supremacy, as we talk about racism, as we talk about black progress and black liberation. Hip hop has influenced much of that thoughts. So again, I want to thank hip hop yesterday, today, and going forward. Today's program will focus on youth's role in shaping the worldwide phenomenon known as hip hop. We will look at the evolution of hip hop and the transition from Africa to America. We will look at the early 1900s role in shaping hip hop. We will look at the civil rights movement's role in shaping hip hop. We will also look at the 4 elements of hip hop, as well as look at the 9 elements in its expansion of hip hop. And then we will conclude with the present day analysis of hip hop and what future implications look like. For us to have a well-rounded understanding of the context in which hip hop was created, it is only fitting that we take an evolutional approach into this phenomenon known as hip hop. We are going to go back to its starting. And hip hop derived out of the African culture. You've got West African influence, you've got South African influence. So in the African culture, the griots are the storytellers, they're the knowledge transmitters, they are the historians in African society. And you couple that with the African drum. The African drum was used for rites of passage. The African drum was used as a warning signal. The African drum was used in every important marker in African life. So it is very important that you have this combination of the African griot and the African drum, which transitioned to the Americas and still was used to communicate from one African to the next African. As the enslaved Africans came to the United States, there was no common language. So because of this, you have what is called the Gullah language. It is important to understand that the Gullah Nation in South Carolina had many different African tribes and nations enslaved who were to communicate and were to work in the institution of slavery. But they had no form of communication. And due to that, they created this language called Gullah. And with the Gullah language, some of the traditions, some of the African ways of living were passed down. Even though there were different tribes and different nations amongst Africans, they were able to communicate through this language known as Gullah. And that is important because the use of storytelling, the use of the drum was essential to the transmission and the communication between Africans who were from different tribes and different nations during enslavement in our first arrival. So with that, different generations were able to continue picking up different traditional practices from Africa. And with that, the griot, the drum, still was a pertinent figure in the African storytelling. As we move into the 1900s, we have different variations of griots. When I think about Cab Calloway, the great jazz musician who used a scat for a form of communicating, we could argue he was one of the first MCs. He understood that his oratorical gifts and his mouth was an instrument that he could command an audience with. As we emerge into the civil rights movement, and during a time when black people once again were trying to fight for their liberation in this country, there was, throughout our arrival here, there's always been a commitment and following to the church, the black church, and the black pastor has always been a prominent figure in the community, one that people would follow behind. Many times having oratorical brilliance and a lot of charisma on the mic that many youth would look up to. As we get to later in the civil rights movement and we emerge into the Black Power stage, there were a lot of Black Power ministers and the Black Panther Party, really brilliant speakers who really could command the ear of young people with their commitment to black progress, with their commitment to black liberation. And out of this, you have different emerging groups. You have the last poets who emerge, and they're using a spoken word, they're using the drum to really send messages just like the griots of yesterday, just like the drummers of yesterday in African times, really telling stories, really giving blueprints to life, really telling about the social conditions in which black people are living in and giving hope through what it could be like with black liberation. You've got the scholarship of James Baldwin is influencing these young people through his art. So during these times, you have different poets. You got the black, you've got the last poets. You've got Gil Scott-Heron. You've got Nikki Giovanni. You've got Maya Angelou. You've got black poets who are really telling black everyday life, black struggle, black resilience, and black liberation, and really starting to create an identity not given to black people by the oppressor of white supremacy, rather giving an identity to black people and saying to the world and to each other that it's okay to be black and be proud to be black, and you can accomplish many things when you understand that you are not a slave, you're not enslaved, rather you are black and liberated. So free your mind and understand your history. And they're doing this by words, they are doing this by spoken words, and they are starting a revolution with young people who are really starting to develop their own sense of identity, in particular black identity. As the Black Power era is concluding, we see an emergence of black pride like none other. We see the commitment and the connection back to what it means to be African. We see the owning and defining of what it means to be black, whether it's political or Afro or African American. We see the definitions being emerged, and we seeing black people lead in this definition and this defining on what it means to be African, what it means to be black. And in years past, identity was taken, identity was robbed of. Much of the black art, much of the black brilliance as far as innovation had been stolen for years by white corporations that would have black people in the background in the closet and have white people out in front for show and putting their names on it. Early 70s, you have what is known, you have the emergence of what is known as hip hop. Hip hop, which originated from the godfather of hip hop known as Kool Herc, who was Jamaican born, grew up in New York for much of his time, spent some time in Jamaica, but he was a DJ, and he would often travel back to the islands and gather new art forms to bring back to the States. And one of the things that he brought back to the States was this propensity to utilize the break beat. And this break beat in the song is the part where it really gets people up and really gets people dancing. So he brought this to the South Bronx, and from there it took on. It was a domino effect where other DJs started picking up on his art form, and from that, by the early 1972, 1973, we have the creation of what is known as hip hop. And one of the founding fathers, again, is Kool Herc, and another one is African Bambaataa. African Bambaataa was a street brilliant scholar who was also a DJ and really was in a space of trying to find his connection to his African roots. So African Bambaataa created what was known as the Zulu Nation. And in the Zulu Nation, it was a conglomerate of DJs, it was a conglomerate of MCs, and they really looked at religion, they really looked at ways that they could create black unity, and really looked at ways that they could help stop street violence and street gangs, as it was very, very, very common for young black youth, young Puerto Rican youth in New York to be involved in some of the street gangs. And at this time, you also have to remember that many of the black leaders had been killed. There was no Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. There was no Malcolm X. So the movement for many has slowed down. And during this time, youth were not listening to the preachers. They were not listening to the elders in the same way that they once did. And this scholarship, this youth language of hip hop came to fruition and really gave young people a voice. And due to this, there were 4 pillars of hip hop created. Of course, we've mentioned the DJ. The DJ was the essential cornerstone of hip hop. Then you have the MC. MCing will start to emerge in the early 80s. Then you also have a way that connected black and Puerto Rican youth. You have graffiti, and you also have what is known as breakdancing. So these are the 4 pillars of hip hop that start to all emerge in the early 70s. And by the 1980, you have a transition that's occurring between the DJ being the cornerstone of hip hop into the emergence of the MC. And the MC eventually takes on the emergence into the lead of hip hop. This emergence of hip hop would not have come to fruition without the past generations of jazz, of R&B, of gospel, of rock and roll. You've got Millie Jackson, you've got James Brown, as we could argue are some of the first MCs. And you also have different techniques emerging from the brilliance of these young people who are creating this art form, to where they are scientifically mastering how to mix different records together with another record, counting the break beats, taking these different musics, taking different genres and records and mixing them together to get the people to dance and to get the people to grooving and moving to this brilliant new art form. It creates such a hysteria that now you have DJs competing to do to enhance it better than the last person enhanced it. So now the mixes and the scratches are getting faster. They're getting more clever in the technique. People are turning around and doing it from behind their back. They're using different techniques to outdo one DJ to the next DJ. So the form of the techniques are evolving, and the richness of the arts is evolving. The early 1980s, you have um, the emergence of the MC. Now, the MC was also always part of the crews, the DJ crews, and the MC's role was to make sure that the party stayed hype. So they would say some slick stuff on the mic that would keep the party hype. They would do shout outs. They would talk about different communities in different cities, just keeping the party hype and the people hype about being in the space and having this celebratory, jovial experience with the DJ who was rocking the spot. So by the 1980s, you have the emergence of the MC who starts to take the lead and really starts to put rhymes together on the beats. And so one of the first major albums or records for hip hop was Rapper's Delight, was dropped in 1979 and blew up the charts. And then the next major smash for hip hop was one that really beautifully gave a depiction of New York in the early 80s, of its poverty stricken, crime infested, lack of employment, lack of opportunity, despairing educational system, and album that came, a record that came out of this despair in New York at the time was a song called The Message. And this song just really brought listeners into a world of New York that many may not have seen outside of Madison Ave or Manhattan. It really gave a depiction of everyday struggle in the urban setting of New York. And the song, the message, is so important because the lyrics could transcend through different decades and still be relevant in 2020 as it was in the late 70s, early 80s. By 1985, black art was not being played on this important music station known as Music TV or Music Television, MTV. And thank you to Michael Jackson being this R&B major star. Black music is starting to be played on MTV. And by the late 1980s, you have the first ascension into mainstream music, hip hop, because of a video station by MTV creating a show called Yo MTV Raps, which really introduced and took hip hop into a bigger world stage than it had already been on. Hip hop at that point had a couple movies. Hip hop at that point had some major successes with Run DMC. Run DMC in collaboration with Aerosmith, that was a huge success. We had our first major rap label with Def Jam, and what you were starting to see was the emergence of the rapper into this mainstream success. And like so often, black art once again was predatorial compromised or predatorial sought after, and it was believed by white record companies that hip hop would be very profitable, very, very profitable art form. And so you start to see other forms of hip hop not be in the spotlight to the same degree. So you don't see the same commitment to graffiti, you don't see the same commitment to breaking. Really, the music portion of hip hop is what's really being commoditized at this time. So by the late 80s, you start to have really a huge emergence of different types of MCs. You have the East Coast, you have the West Coast, which is merging, and they're known for what is known as gangster rap. So they are telling you stories from the inner cities of the LAs or the Bay Areas. You have the East Coast, which is telling you the stories about inner city New York. And you're seeing a lot of parallels between the two with different vernacular, with different ways of delivery. You have the emergence of, and I would argue that hip hop has always had a conscious side to it, and without naming it or coining it consciousness, you have your public enemies. You also have different styles. You have those that can rap fast. You have those that are really art storytellers and real great narrators. You have your Big Daddy Kanes. You have your Redmans. You have your Cool Mo D, and then you have your educators like KRS-One, who are really teaching through rhyme, teaching about black history, talking about black unity, talking about stopping the violence. You have all this emerging, and by the late 80s, hip hop is a global phenomenon. Hip hop evolving in ways to where hip hop has received its first Grammy by the late 80s. And within hip hop, you're starting to see some riffs come to fruition. So you are having people in the art form who are getting mad at one another because of one's commercial success. So now you have these ideologies forming commercial MCs or rappers, MC meaning the master of ceremony, or you have the underground rappers, and then you have different rappers who are more lyrical, and then you have different rappers who are more concerned about fun and partying. So you have all these different variations of storytelling that cover anything from pregnancy to house parties to academics to black identity to politics. And then by the early 90s, which is considered the golden era of hip hop, you start to see hip hop go to another level to where it becomes worldwide on another level to where it is 24/7 with the relationship of the video. Hip hop videos start to become $400,000 videos. You start to see the emergence of an era where you had some of the greatest MCs emerge. You also have some of the time where the art form, in its popularity, compromised some of its integrity, if you will. What people were willing to do for money on a record and on a video just went to another level and really caused some division within hip hop. At the same time, you have a fictitious beef that is started, and it creates a tension that becomes so bad that there are East Coast and West Coast violence that ends up taking the life of two of hip hop's most revered MCs, that being the Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, because of a fictitious beef that was started for the capitalization and making and earning more money by making more CDs and creating this fake violence that replicated the real violence that was happening in a lot of communities and inner cities. So while hip hop is revered, or while the 1990s is revered as the golden age of hip hop, and you saw a lot of brilliant MCs and a lot of brilliance out of hip hop emerge to the extent where it was on every other commercial. You saw more music labels. You saw more artists being signed. Then you saw the emergence of more artists creating their own record companies. And you really start to see the artists start to take control business-wise of their art. But at the same time, big business still compromised the art because money started to supersede the art form. With this phenomenon we know of hip hop, the globalization of it, you can find youth MCs in France, to Sierra Leone, to Brazil, to Yugoslavia, and to China, to Korea. And what you will see is, one, there is no university of hip hop. Yet and still, the academic and the scholarship of hip hop has traveled throughout the world, and young people are learning and studying the different various forms of hip hop, dancing, DJing, graffiti, and MCing. And around the world, you'll see this beautiful mosaic and testament to the power of hip hop in different various forms from different youths across the nation. So we've been worldwide. We've seen what it has looked like stateside. Minnesota has its own contributions to hip hop: Carnage, Rhyme Sayers, the Micronauts, various producers, various MCs. So many. I wouldn't feel right naming them all because I'll miss somebody. You can look around the city, juxtaposition art. My man and his wife, Deanna and Roger Cummings, have created Juxtaposition Art Studio, which really takes young talent and they go around the communities and they're creating murals. The evolution of hip hop around the city of Minneapolis is alive and well. If you're looking, you will see. If you're paying attention and listen, you will hear. So, in hip hop's emergence into multiple different elements, one of the elements of the 9 elements is street entrepreneurship. So, you have hip hop in the clothing industry. Um, if you go back to the mid '90s, you had FUBU and Cross Color, which is influenced heavily by hip hop culture and made even bigger by hip hop culture. You have MCs who have emerged into being huge Hollywood box office hits with the emergence of Will Smith and LL Cool J. You have hip hop, which is selling all types of merchandising and creating all types of crazy capital, to the day of the 2020 where the MC has gotten bold enough and business savvy enough to create their own business, cutting out big capital music industry recording artists, and they do it themselves with this technology of YouTube and the ability to create your beats on computers. There is no need for the big business supplier anymore. So you've got many young rappers who are becoming millionaires because they don't have a middle person taking their money. They're creating their own businesses, they're creating their own beats, and they're learning their own business, and they're making themselves self-millionaires because of it. Course of 40 years, hip hop has evolved into ways that the world has gravitated towards it and is directed by it in many ways. Hip hop, again, is in the education setting. Hip hop, again, is in the political setting. Hip hop, again, is in the marketing. Hip hop, again, is selling foods and selling clothes. Hip hop is a staple of the world. It has transcended on just being a youth language that grew out of inner city youth into a global phenomenon where it is a voice, one voice that speaks youth and speaks youth fluently and speaks to the world to articulate how young people are experiencing the world. It is a great pleasure to have been influenced and to continually to be influenced by hip hop, and I am excited to see where it goes from here. I want to thank you for taking some time to get an overview, a cursory learning experience about hip hop. I want to thank MELSA and the Dakota County Library for providing this platform through this virtual programming to share with community my love, hip hop. My name is Dr. Marcellus Davis, and I want to thank you for joining in.